What is going on, everyone? This is Zach from Clutch Crew Sports back with another podcast episode. And here today's episode, guys, we're going to talk about the college football season. So, for some teams, the season has already started, but really, the true week one of college football starts this week. With college being back on the TV, we decided to dedicate this entire episode talking about just the entire season as a preview, give some of our predictions and some of our takes for this upcoming season. And now let me introduce you to the rest of the crew.
What's going on, guys? It's Connor, the co-host with the most. And yeah, like Zach said, the season did technically start yesterday, but when the most exciting game on the schedule is Nebraska versus Northwestern, then you know that the season hasn't truly started yet. But I'm excited to do this. I know I've done a lot more research into college this year than I've ever done before since I've been taking over doing the previews. So I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, definitely. So like you said there, we've done previews for pretty much every division or every major conference with college football. So we've ranked the teams. Connor and I have both ranked the teams in their divisions and kind of given an overview for the year with their schedule, key players, just where the school is in relation to others. Are they rebuilding? Is this a rebuilding year? Is this all in with a senior quarterback? Is it, make or break season for certain coaches or players? College has definitely changed a lot recently, the last few years, with the transfer portal rules being changed. Now with NIL, it's very much like, everything's up in the air. For example, Timmy McClain, who was I'm going off on a tangent here to start this, but Timmy McClain was USF starting quarterback last year as a true freshman, and he did okay as a true freshman. He's got a great upside as a quarterback. He was one of the highest rated high school QBs in the state of Florida. So USF was like, okay, cool, we've got this good freshman quarterback here, and he, like I said, he was okay. The record was bad last year, but he did all right for himself. But now they bring in the transfer Gary Bohannon from Baylor. He ends up winning the starting job, and then the same day that Bohannon is named the starter instead of McClain, he transfers to UCF. So it's like, whereas like
goes to the rival.
I know 4 or 5 years ago, it's like that would be unheard of, and on a bigger scale. Talk about like Ohio State, Michigan. Seeing Michigan's quarterback go to Ohio State, or something like that. UCF's going to be leaving the conference next year anyway, so it's not like he's going to be playing USF again, but it's still
well, it'd be like in the
that's
NFL,
how college is.
Yeah, it'd be like in the NFL if, like, Dak Prescott all of a sudden went and got, like, when he, like, say his contract ran up, if he, like, all of a sudden went to the Eagles, it's like,
yeah,
that's kind of weird.
It's weird. It's hard to keep up with it because there's so much more moving pieces. It's not like, a team that was really bad last year now all of a sudden can be really good. And vice versa. You could have a team that did really good last year, and now they lost a bunch of players to draft, or coach left and a bunch of players left to join the new coach somewhere else. Teams
Oklahoma.
can rise and fall. Yep, Oklahoma. That's a perfect example of a team like that. So college, the landscape's changed. We've talked on past episodes about just, our thoughts of the whole realignment, the playoff expansion, all the things going on with college. But this year, for this episode anyways, we're just going to focus on this season in particular. We're going to give you guys our playoff predictions, some dark horse teams that we would pick as surprising teams, our favorite games of the year, and our personal favorite teams. We're going to save this for the end, but our favorite teams, we're going to give our expectations, our hopes, for myself, South Florida and Tennessee, and then Connor will talk about App State, North Carolina. So stick to the end if you're a fan of those teams or just want to hear what we think about our teams. But we'll start off with the playoff predictions. So I'll let Connor go ahead and give his playoff predictions first. So, Connor, who do you have as your 4 teams
Oh
in the
boy.
college football playoff? Putting you on the
Yeah,
spot.
so yeah, no, this was definitely out of all these, this was really a hard decision. So the first two are going to surprise no one. Alabama and Ohio State. As much as that pains me as a hater of both of those teams, I mean, I just don't see, like, Alabama's far and away the best team in college football right now. Like, I don't see any way that they don't make it. They would have to, especially given that they don't have to play Georgia this year. They would have to have some sort of massive collapse. Like, they'd have to lose to Texas A&M. Like, they'd probably have to lose. I mean, with Alabama, it's unfortunate that they pretty much have to lose 2 games at least to miss. Like, they can't just lose 1 game. So they would have to, like, lose to Texas A&M or, like, lose to Arkansas or something, and then lose to Georgia in the title game. So I think Alabama for sure. And Ohio State, like, I just think Michigan has too many question marks. Like, I do think there's a possibility they could maybe lose to, like, Wisconsin or something in the Big Ten title game. But, Ohio State, it seems like they've kind of fixed those problems on defense. So I think they're a shoo-in as well. The other two, I'm going to go with Utah as my third team. I think the teams above them, I think there's just going to be a little bit of chaos happening. Like, I think Georgia will get knocked out by losing to Alabama, and then I honestly think that and Texas A&M's above them. Like, they'll get knocked out by losing to Alabama as well. So I've got Utah going in. I think they'll run the table in the Pac-12. The other team that I have going in for the college football playoff as my fourth team is take the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I think they're going to be able to beat Clemson in the rematch this year. And, the key for Notre Dame is the fact that they pretty much always have to go undefeated. But I do think they're going to lose 1 game, but I think it's going to be that game to Ohio State at the beginning. So I don't think it's going to get held over their head too much. And I think they're going to beat Clemson and make it into the college football playoff. So that's my predictions. Like I said, I think it'll be in that order too. I think it'll be Alabama 1, Ohio State 2, Utah 3, and Notre Dame 4.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'll give my 4 as well, and then we'll go ahead and pick winners and stuff. So I'm glad we didn't rehearse this before the podcast, so I was worried that we might have the exact same 4, like
I
it's
was
common.
too.
but luckily we don't. Obviously there's some similarities, but we don't have the exact same 4. So I've also got with you Alabama in making the playoff. I think they're, like you said, they're they're allowed 1 slip up, whether they go undefeated then lose to Georgia in the SEC championship game, or if they lose to an Ole Miss or Arkansas A&M, one of those teams, but then they beat Georgia just like they did last year. I think they get in the playoffs. So I've got Alabama, and I've also got Georgia in as well, just because their schedule is also really easy. As far as the SEC standards go, they pretty much, the SEC East is not, there's no real threat to them in the East. They're definitely way above Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, those teams that I think they're going to have no trouble winning the SEC East. And then, this is another instance where they might look so dominant all season that they can lose to Alabama, just like last year, how they lost to Alabama, but still made the playoff as the 3 seed. So I've got Alabama and Georgia both going back to the playoffs. But then I've got Ohio State making it this year from the Big Ten. I think it's another instance where I think for this year, I kind of envision this year being similar to last year, in that there's a lot of teams that have losses. A lot of good teams have losses. So like last year, we didn't see a whole lot of undefeateds. Actually, Cincinnati was the only undefeated team in the playoffs. So, and that's how they were able to make it. So I think there's going to be some chaos across the board. So I think Ohio State will probably win the Big Ten. I think that'll be good enough for them to make it in the playoffs. And then I've got Clemson. I think Clemson in the ACC is definitely the best team. Now that there's always the possibility for an upset there, but I think they'll have to go undefeated to make it. And then this is kind of like your Utah pick. You had Utah winning the Pac-12 undefeated. I think Clemson is just a little bit better than Utah, so I think they're gonna go undefeated. Utah, I think is pretty good, but I think they might. The problem with Utah is they're for sure not allowed to lose a game. They're like,
yeah,
so
definitely. I mean, the only one that they would maybe slightly excuse. Well, no, they don't play Oregon in the regular season this year, do they? So
I think they. I thought they did.
No, they do. They do.
Yeah.
That's right. That would be the only one that they could maybe slightly excuse, but they would need other stuff to happen for that to work. They couldn't. But you're right, because if they lose to any other Pac-12 teams, it's done.
Yeah,
there's no way.
So those are my four. I've got Alabama. I guess I'll do the order now. I'll say Alabama 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, and then Clemson 4. So now that we've got our 4 picked, Connor, tell us who you think ends up winning it all.
Yeah, so I'll go. I mean, this is going to sound pretty cliche, but I mean, I'm probably going to go straight chalk here in the playoff. It's just, to me, Alabama and Ohio State just seem far and away better than all the other teams. Even Georgia at number 3, I just see Georgia, they have a lot of depth coming back from last year, but they did lose half their team got drafted last year in the NFL. So I definitely see a big gap between 1 and 2 and then 3. So I'm going to say Ohio State beats Utah, and then Alabama easily beats Notre Dame, because Notre Dame, even if they make the playoff, they tend to have embarrassing showings in the playoffs. So, and then I'm going to say that Bryce Young outduels CJ Stroud and Alabama takes the college football playoff. I hope that doesn't happen, but if I'm going from an objective standpoint, that's what I have to go with.
Yeah. I agree with you. Ultimately, I think Alabama wins it. It's like a every other year sort of deal for them.
Yeah, right. They lost it last year, so they got to win it this year.
Yeah, they're not a back-to-back team, but they're an every other year team. That and as far as their opponent, I mean, I think it'd be if you saw Ohio State versus Georgia in the playoffs, I think that'd be a real good game. But it's tough not to pick Georgia. I know this is the rematch of last year, so it's not very. These teams they played so many times now. If they end up playing in the SEC championship again and the national championship, that'd be 4 times in 2 years. But I don't know, man. Georgia, they're still a really good team, so I think I would pick them over Ohio State. But then I'd have Alabama winning that rematch in the championship. So,
oh man, playoff expansion need it to happen.
yeah.
This isn't getting boring at all.
Yep. Yeah. So speaking of it not getting boring, there's always the possibility. Last year we saw it come to truth with Cincinnati making the playoffs. So let's go and pick some dark horse sort of surprise teams that might not necessarily make the college football playoff, but might be, one of those first 2 teams out. Maybe they make it. Just some teams that nobody's really talking about as a national championship, true contender, but we could see somehow making it. For me, I'm going to have to pick Utah as one of mine, which Connor kind of stole the Utah thunder from me. but no, it's shocking to me that they're picked 3rd or something by a lot of people in the Pac-12. They manhandled Oregon twice last year, and Oregon's who everybody has winning, or USC. And I do think USC will be better, but from a physical standpoint, I think Utah is they're just it's hard to play Utah. So I think, they've got to they got to go at Florida early in the year. If they lose that, then it's, all bets are off. But, if they can somehow come out of their Pac-12, schedule unscathed, I think they could they could be for sure making the playoff because, like I said, I think a lot of these teams are going to have one loss. I think in Ohio State, the Big Ten is going to beat up on each other. I think the Big 12 will as well, ACC. So if Utah can come out unscathed, they're definitely, I think, a dark horse team, and it'd be exciting for them to do so. I'm pulling for Utah this year. But Connor, tell me about one of your dark horse surprise teams.
Yeah, for sure. So I have, you got the Pac-12 team. I know another thing, just to jump on your Utah thing, another thing helping them is the fact they're already ranked number 7. Like they don't come from low in the rankings to, do something like that. But I'm going to go ahead and go with the NC State Wolfpack, which, they had they're one of these teams that for the past couple of seasons is really just kind of like they've always been like possibly in the mix to do something, but they kind of like they never win the games that they need to. It's like, okay, back in 2020, it was like, okay, we lose to Clemson. It seems like most of the time they were losing to Clemson, and that's what was hurting them. But then, like, last year, it was the case of, okay, we have the chance to finally win the ACC Atlantic, but then they go and lose to Wake Forest, even though they beat Clemson. It's like, okay, they seem to never be able to put it all together, but I think they could put it all together this year. I mean, they're actually ranked number 13, which is surprising. I'm not sure a lot of people thought they were going to be. So, I mean, some people didn't think they were going to be ranked at all, but the fact that they were actually ranked number 13 is pretty crazy. And they have a pathway to get into the college football playoff if they can somehow get through the ACC unscathed, because they do play Clemson, they do play Wake Forest by virtue of being in the Atlantic, but it's also likely that if they make it all the way through the Atlantic, they're going to be playing Pittsburgh in the Coastal, which the analysts are pretty high on Pittsburgh this year too. So they definitely have the strength of schedule to make it into the college football playoff, and this is a really experienced group. Like it's a group that what you're going to get from them on a base level. Like, okay, we know we can probably easily pull out 8, 9, 10 wins with this group easily. But it's all about, watching and seeing if they can take it to that next level. Can we get those 11, 12 win seasons? Can we beat Clemson? Can we beat Wake Forest? Can we actually win an ACC championship? And if that's the case, I think they definitely have a really strong case to make it to the college football playoff. I mean, like you said, I agree that, the Big Ten could possibly beat up on each other, like Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State. Like those are going to be some wars. Georgia's got question marks, like even though, they're still a good team, but they lost a lot. So I'm going to go with the NC State Wolfpack here.
All right, and then my second pick is going to be Wisconsin from the Big Ten West. I think they're just one of these teams. They had expectations last year; they didn't quite deliver, but this year I think they break through. They were 9-4 last year. I think they're going to have a really good season this year, end up winning the West, like I mentioned in my preview. But they're going to have the resume. I think if these Big Ten teams are as good as projected, I think they'll have the resume to where they could be afforded a loss. They play at Ohio State in September. They play at Michigan State and, at Iowa. So like that, that's a tough 3 road games in the Big Ten, but that's the sort of thing that gives them the flexibility to lose one of those, but still make the playoffs depending on how these other teams in other conferences fare. I just think they're kind of an underrated team in that aspect. But if they were to win all those games, win their slate, I think they're for sure making it. And to me, they're the ones that could challenge the Big Ten, challenge Ohio State from the Big Ten West. What about you, Connor? What's your second dark horse surprise team?
Yeah, so my second dark horse team here is going to be it's a story that we saw last year, and while I think it would definitely be a long shot for this team to make the college football playoff. It could be, they definitely, in my mind, could make a New Year's bowl game. And, who knows, maybe if chaos ensues, they could somehow squeak in there. But I'm going to go with the Houston Cougars. They were a really good team last year. They only had 2 losses last year. They unfortunately had a loss to Texas Tech somehow at the beginning of the year. But then, they actually played for the first half of the American Championship game. They played Cincinnati close. It was like 14-13 at halftime. They kind of let Cincinnati run away with it at the end, but Houston, they're bringing back a more complete squad this year than Cincinnati is. And, it's definitely, this is a benefit to them schedule wise, maybe not a benefit to them in terms of, strength of schedule if they wanted to have any aspirations of making the college football playoff, but they don't play Cincinnati during the regular season. So they don't have to have that battle early on. So it's really going to come down to the American Championship game between Cincinnati and Houston. And I think Houston has the edge this time. Like I said, they're bringing back a more complete team. I know you talked about them in your American preview that you've got them finishing higher than Cincinnati. And they could be. It seems like we always have this every year, like the one group of five team that really advocates for. I saw a thing on a website about they were ranking every college football team, and they were placing like Houston in this tier of like this, the quote unquote, the system's not fair. As these group of five teams, there's one every year that really probably should have a chance but never gets the chance, and I think Houston's going to be that team this year, because I think losing Desmond Ridder is just going to be a huge loss. Replacing the quarterback is tough, so I think Houston's got the edge.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Out of the group of five, they're the ones that I think are the most dangerous. I don't think the chips are going to fall their favor as far as, a playoff spot lined up. And who knows, these teams can always just lose an off game here or there to someone in their conference, like a UCF or a Memphis. Somebody like that could upset a Houston, and then all bets are off. Yeah, they're definitely out after that, but they can still end up having a really good season, getting a great bowl game and win that. So it's not always about the championship. Only one team can win that. But in college, you have all these other bowls, so teams can still have, end their season on a win, whereas like all these other sports, every team that makes the playoffs except for one ends on a loss. But let's go ahead and talk about some of our favorite games for the year. So I will go ahead and pick mine. I think my favorite game I'm most looking forward to this year is going to be the Notre Dame Clemson game. I think that's got huge implications. I picked Clemson to make my college football playoff. Connor picked Notre Dame. I think that game right there determines that spot very likely. If Notre Dame wins it, they could have a great case to make it. If Clemson wins it, that's another good win for them on their schedule. So to me, that's a game. When they've played before, it's usually been pretty good. I remember a few years ago that game was pretty wild with overtimes. But that's one that I'm looking forward to. And it's also one that you don't see every year as well. It's not a traditional rivalry game that you see every year. So for me, that's the one that stands out. But what about you, Connor?
Yeah, mine is a traditional rivalry game. Mine's going to be the Oklahoma and Texas game. And, for the most part, when it comes to this rivalry game, Texas is they've played Oklahoma well, but it seems like every year, where Oklahoma just has an objectively better team for the most part. And, Oklahoma, it's they have college football playoff expectations, and Texas is just kind of going in there trying to, get a win over Oklahoma, beat their rival. But this year, the Big 12 is really up in the air this year. It's really there are four teams that could contend for the Big 12 between Oklahoma, Baylor, Oklahoma State, and Texas. And, that's kind of when it really all gets started. That's the big game to get everything going. The one thing I like about the Big 12 is that all the teams play each other, and it's like a make or break moment. Whichever team loses that game, could potentially be losing whatever sort of playoff aspirations they had in the foot. They're a bit more far-fetched than Oklahoma, given that, the other three ahead of them are all ranked in the top 15 and Texas isn't ranked. But, Texas has the opportunity to sneak in there. If they can beat all three of those teams, then, they'll definitely make themselves a strong case for the college football playoffs. So definitely that game this year. And, even when Texas still gives Oklahoma a good game, so definitely want to watch that one, and it's going to be really determinative of what happens in the wide open Big 12 this year.
Yeah, that's always a great game to watch. So I'm excited for that one as well. So let's wrap things up on this episode and talk about our favorite teams and kind of our season expectations for them. So I'll start with my teams, and then I'll let Connor talk about his. But I'll start with the Tennessee Volunteers. Last year was a real pleasant surprise for me and all Tennessee fans. Beating Kentucky, winning a lot of their games at the end of the year, Missouri, South Carolina. Things started out not so great, but they ended pretty positively. They just came up short in the bowl game on a controversial referee call, but I think this is going to be a real good year for Tennessee. I think it could be their best year since the Josh Dobbs year for Tennessee. I mean, Hendon Hooker is a Heisman watch candidate at quarterback. If he can play like he did last year, his second year on the team, I think that'd be, he really could be in the Heisman race, which I'm pulling for that. As far as like their schedule
Me
goes,
too.
as far as their schedule goes, I mean, it's going to be tough. I definitely think they're going to lose to Alabama and Georgia. I think, Joey Galloway had them beating Georgia, but those are two teams I just think it's just unfortunate they have to play two of the best teams. But I just really want to beat Florida. That's, we've beaten Kentucky when Kentucky's good. We've beaten all these other Eastern teams before. I would love to beat a team from the SEC West. I feel like it's been forever since we did that. But
you get stuck playing Alabama every year, so you only have one
Alabama
opportunity
every
at
year.
it.
Yeah, and so we draw LSU, which LSU on the road is going to be tough. But that home game against Florida, I mean, I expect if they start out 3-0 and beat Ball State, Pittsburgh, and Akron, then I mean that's just going to be a wild game to go to if you're in Knoxville. But I think Tennessee can have a real good season this year, and be ranked and make a pretty good bowl game. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I've got USF here. USF I think is in sort of a make or break it year for their head coach Jeff Scott. It's everything. There's all this positive momentum with the on-campus stadium plans coming out, new jersey uniforms, new training facilities, indoor practice fields, all these like construction projects that are going on campus for the football team. It's like all this hype's coming up. The team is really experienced. They're bringing back a lot of players from last year. They have one of the most like continuities from teams last year. So, I'm just wanting some wins from this team. I just want to see them be competitive against the good teams in the American, but also I want to see more than 2 wins. I want to see them obviously beat the Cupcakes in the American, but then really maybe get an upset win against one of the better teams like in Eastern Carolina or Memphis. Just, be competitive and win some games is really what I'm expecting and hopeful for. Otherwise, it's going to be another bad year like the last 2 years have been. And then, who knows what happens then with the head coach, and the program starting from scratch again, which I don't want to see. But Connor, what about you? You've got 2 teams from North Carolina that you're a fan of. So talk about your expectations for them.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it'd be nice for you if you guys could send UCF to the Big 12 with a loss. I'm sure that'd be really nice for you if y'all could win that.
It's going to be a home game for us too, so I'm definitely going to try and go to that.
So I'll start with the team from the Power 5 conference, the UNC Tar Heels, which last year was definitely a huge disappointment as a UNC fan. I mean, there was a lot of expectations around this team. We were ranked in the top 25 at the start of the year for the first time in ages. I mean, Sam Howell was supposedly going to be a top 5 draft pick. We had lost Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, but we brought back a lot of receivers. The O-line was supposed to be one of the best in the ACC, and I don't know. It just all kind of fell apart. Like the O-line definitely got overhyped somewhere because Sam Howell was running for his life. And I mean, I went to their season finale against NC State, and it was just like they just couldn't get anything going on offense. Like the offense was so dynamic the year before, and then like it just kind of seemed like Howell was a man on his own. out there last season. So, but obviously this year with a new new quarterback, and an experienced head coach. I have faith in Mac Brown. He's a national championship winning coach. He's definitely turned UNC around as a football program because there was a lot of mediocrity that was going on with the program. UNC is one of these schools like Kansas and Kentucky that you definitely think of more as a basketball school. But the pieces are there for them to make a run. The Coastal is always wide open when it comes to the ACC. It's like the Atlantic is just always ruled by Clemson, but the Coastal is always wide open. They have opportunities. They're playing against Notre Dame early in the year. They're playing against Wake. They're playing against NC State. So they have a lot of matchups against ranked teams. I don't think they're going to win the Coastal, unfortunately. I think Miami and Pittsburgh are probably a bit too talented for them, but at least for them, they kind of want to. It's going to be important for them to get to a situation where I just want to beat all of our in-state rivals this year. We've lost. I mean, we're going to beat Duke, no problem. But I want to beat Wake Forest. We lost to them last year, and we, in heartbreaking fashion, lost to NC last year. I mean, we had the lead at the end of the game and just completely collapsed. So I'm hoping for a difference there. But I'm going to say they'll probably finish third in the Coastal. But Appalachian State, on the other hand. This is kind of like a rebuilding year for them. We lost a lot. We lost our top 3 wide receivers. We lost a lot of our offensive linemen. We lost a lot of pieces on defense, but we still have the best rushing offense in the Sun Belt. We have honestly, we have a top 10 rushing offense in the country. We have some ridiculous streak going of 5 or 6 years in a row. We've had a 1,000-yard rusher. And the pieces are there in the Sun Belt because the other Sun Belt powerhouse, Louisiana, they're kind of just like us. They lost a lot of pieces. We both had really heavy senior classes that are going out, and it's going to be a different look this year. Of course, the Sun Belt added 4 new teams over during the off season, and we definitely have a different division. 3 of the teams in our division are going to be different this year because Troy moved over to the West. And we added Marshall, James Madison, and Old Dominion. So it's going to be interesting for sure. I mean, our biggest competition's obviously going to be Carolina is going to be a big competition. We actually get to avoid playing Louisiana this year, which is the first time since I enrolled at App State back in 2017. So we've played them every year. But I see a lot of good things for us. I mean, no college football playoff expectations or anything. Since we're not ranked or anything, but I definitely could see this team if everything comes together. We have a home game against UNC at the start of the year that I think we can definitely win. I can definitely see we're going to have one loss, unfortunately, at least because we're playing Texas A&M in College Station, so that's going to be a loss. But I could easily see a 12-1 season for us, and maybe potentially fighting Houston or Cincinnati to get into that New Year's Six bowl game for the Group of 5 team.
Alrighty, guys. So that will wrap up this episode. Hopefully, you enjoyed our analysis there at the end on our favorite teams. We're watching we're gonna watch all these college football games that we can, but those teams are every week we're trying to watch. So, obviously, you always want your team to win. But that's gonna wrap this episode up, guys. Thanks for listening and watching. And until next time, remember, be clutch.
For Eric, peace.